Hey there guys, Botstowo here with episode 2 of my 3-part series on HS Cover Co. Where we left off, we were at around 1930, and today we'll cover up to the early 1970s. So at this point in time, this is still, of course, after World War I, so a bunch of advancements in respirator technology arrived very quickly, and so all these industrial safety companies were producing actually legitimately good respirators, while HS Cover Co. was still using technology from around the 1870s. I mean, that's when the H.R. Hurd automatic respirator was patented, and Cover was still using Cover's automatic respirator as the flagship product, and of course, to a lesser extent, the Nod and Shake smoke mask, which is still essentially just one of those attached to a pair of goggles. And because of this technological divide, HS Cover Co. very quickly lost its position as the leading manufacturer of industrial respiratory protection. In my opinion, they specifically lost it to Mine Safety Appliances, who notably never made an automatic respirator. Some speculation as to why that was, and why MSA became the leader in this field, is because, well, they had a lot of talent from the Chemical Warfare Service from World War I. These were the people that, just a couple years prior, helped develop the technology that made HS Cover Co.'s masks obsolete, and the fact that MSA was able to poach so many of them helped them get a massive head start over the other industrial safety companies. And I mean, these folks like Burrell and all the others were real trailblazers, so they really had no interest in creating yet another sponge respirator when they could use things like felt. And then you've got the Burrell Cops, which sold very well because it was, quite good, and that helped solidify MSA's masks as being the best in the field. Anyhow, HS Cover Co. was definitely slipping at this point, and in the early 1930s, Cover decided to start designing a series of masks that would eventually become the Dupor line. The first known predecessor to the Dupor series had its patent filed for in 1933, however, it's not known if it was ever actually sold. It looked similar to a Dupor No. 4, but with a flutter valve on the front instead of this bulb-type valve. And that makes a lot of sense because the Dupor No. 4 was patented just a year later in 1934. Oh yeah, and that happens alongside the patenting of the bulb-type valve that you see on most Dupor respirators. And at the end of the 30s, the Dupor series would have expanded to include the Dupor No. 1, 10, 20, 24, 40, and 46. It should be noted, though, that the Dupor series respirators weren't the only things Cover was selling. He also continued to sell the Cover's automatic respirator and the Nod and Shake smoke mask. However, they did change up the name a little bit in the marketing. The boxes stayed the same. They were the Dupor water-cooled automatic respirator and the Dupor water-cooled smoke mask, respectively. In fact, the Cover's automatic respirator would be sold into the late 1960s and possibly even the early 1970s, making the automatic respirator design the longest surviving, considering that Hurd patented his very first automatic respirator in the late 1870s. So this design almost lasted a century. Speaking of things they continued to sell the Nod and Shake goggles, which I believe last time I mentioned they sold into the 1990s. Unfortunately, not much is known about the decades following the 1940s, but I will cover what I do know. In 1950, after 55 years of marriage, HS Cover's wife, Katie Burkheiser, dies. It doesn't seem that Cover ever remarried. Throughout the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the Dupor No. 4 and the Nod and Shake goggles started getting advertised more and more, while the rest of the Dupor series started to take a back seat. But on September the 21st of 1961, HS Cover himself would die aged 94. Specifically, Cover would die in the River Park Nursing Home in South Bend, Indiana at 3:15 a.m. His funeral was conducted the following Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Welsheimer Funeral Home by Pastor Kenneth R. Hemphill of the First Methodist Church. He was entombed in the Highland Mausoleum with his wife Katie. He was outlived by his 2 great-grandchildren, his 2 grandchildren, his son Harold, and his daughter Estelle Catherine Cover. As I mentioned in the last episode, Estelle was born on October 2nd of 1900. In the 1920s, she achieved her bachelor's degree in music from the Illinois Women's College. Afterwards, she went on to get her master's degree from the Bush Conservatory in Chicago. Then she went to Berlin to study music under Professors Lichtentritt and Zervanki, which I am pronouncing incorrectly. Other than that, I don't know much about her. Until, of course, 1961, with the death of H.S. Cover, Estelle took over H.S. Cover Co. Due to the stagnation that occurred during this period, specifically in their products, it seems that she didn't really do anything with it until her death in 1971. She would be entombed in the Highland Mausoleum alongside her father, her mother, and her brother. Now, a year passes where I don't know who was running H.S. Cover Co., but in 1972, it was purchased by a William Fowler Moon. And that's where we'll leave off for today. And with all that history out of the way, why don't we take a closer look at these masks? We will start with the Dupor No. 4. As you can see, it is made out of this black rubber that became standard on the Dupor series. On top of that, it's got the same head strap as on the Nod and Shake goggles and the later Covers automatic respirators. The masks come stock with a little sock around the peripheral seal to help make it more comfortable. Can't really see it under the sock, but they come with 2 little divots for the nose, which brings us to the fact that this is a bi-directional respirator. You can wear it either this way or this way, and it'll still work just as well. Down the middle here, you can see the name of the mask, and it's, well, the fact that it's patented. Then on the valve, you can see the patent for that. And then on the other side, a series more patents. On the front here is your exhale valve. It is the standard Dupor bulb valve, and it filters via these 2 felt discs. Later examples of these use these gray plastic covers, while the earlier ones use metal without these little flourishes there, and a wire mesh screen to go over the felt. The covers are held in place by 4 rubber pegs on the filter pocket there, and the felt pad can just be popped right out of there. As you can see, it's got 7 little inlet holes there, no inlet valve. This is actually the same design as on Cover's automatic respirator. So yeah, that's just a neat little callback there. The interior is rather simple. There's not a lot to see in there. It's just a void with your valve at the very tip. The Dupor No. 4 comes in a somewhat sizable cardboard box, bigger than that for the Cover's automatic respirator. The design does change a few times throughout the sale of these. However, it seems to only vary in the picture that's used on the front. This seems to be a 1940s example because I recognize that picture from their 1940s ad campaigns, specifically their Be Fresh, Stay Fresh, and Why Take Chances ad campaigns. Every side has writing on it, so I will just pan across it so you can read it. Pause the video if you'd like to. It also comes with these 2 instruction cards. And that's pretty much all there is to say about the Dupor No. 4, so we can move on to the Dupor No. 1. The Dupor No. 1, wait a minute. There we go. The Dupor No. 1 was introduced in the late 1930s as a lightweight competitor to proper half-face respirators. It was also marketed as a respirator you could use while you eat or smoke. And how that works is, well, as you can see, it only covers your nose. In 1940, HS Cover would patent a second nose respirator, but it seems like it went nowhere and was never actually sold. Speaking of not selling, these things did sell very poorly, so they are quite rare today. Despite their poor sales, they would stay on the market for decades. But getting into the mask itself, you can see that it is made out of that Dupor black rubber. It has a bottom-mounted exhale valve and a filter right there on the front. The inside, you can see the inlet valve, something HS Cover didn't really put on a lot of respirators. Then there's that. And there is a little metal wire there for adjusting it to your nose. It was held to the face by these two elastic cord loops that you would tie to the length required to get it snugly on your ears. The filter can be unthreaded, showing us a better look at the inlet valve. On top of that, you can see the fact that the filter for this thing is folded in multiple times, giving it its 9 square inches of felt. And that's a pretty impressive filtering area for something this small. Oh, and I should mention that unlike on most masks, the male threading is actually on the facepiece instead of on the filter. That makes replacement filters just a tiny bit cheaper. And with that, let's move on to the box. As you can see, it is quite small. The Dupor No. 1 does actually fit in there rather handily, and it is a really aesthetically pleasing box with a lot of neat little designs, like on the front here. Then on the top, it says worn by men or women, so for my non-binary viewers, I'm sorry, you're not allowed to wear it. On this side, here's where it says it can not interfere with glasses or goggles. That's just another one of these. And then on here, there's where it says that you can eat, sleep, and smoke. Yep, and that's all for the outside. Also in there is a little instruction card. It's just one-sided. And then some extra flaps for the exhale valve. I'm not going to take the valve out of the envelope because I don't want to damage it. And with that, I think that's all I really wanted to say. Remember that the next and final episode of this series is coming out next week. It'll be on 1972 to the present. So yeah, thank you very much for watching. I will see you in the next one in exactly 1 week.